So the idea with Derby was, hey, can we use this stuff to build web apps? Like, can we build web apps on top of a awesome real-time fast framework where every time any of my clients, anyone in any web browser makes any modification to any data, everybody else who's looking at the same piece of data will be able to see the change immediately. Like, it'll just happen in real time. And this is something I care a lot about. So this is one of the reasons why I'm really sad that we're kind of stuck with REST. Because REST's really kind of crappy. And REST's crappy in two important ways. Oh, by the way, just a show of hands. Hands up who works with REST on a daily basis. Okay, so basically everybody. So I'm telling you this thing that's small and light and beautiful is awful. So let me justify this a little bit. The first reason why REST isn't good enough is because when you want to start doing real-time queries and real-time stuff, there's state. There's state. We need state because we need to keep track of which version the client is at. When a change gets made on my client in my browser, your browser needs to find out about that change immediately. So you need to subscribe to the document. You need to subscribe to the document at a particular version. So if you go offline and come back online again, then you know that you're looking at version 100 of the document and there's been 20 changes which have happened in the meantime, so I can give you all those changes without having to give you all new data. Because if I give you all new data, I'm going to blow away your changes. So this is the kind of stuff that REST doesn't do well at all. And the other thing that REST doesn't do well at all is that it kind of introduces this extra piece that I hate in my programs, which is it makes me make decisions. This, for me, is the answer to this question of what is a program made out of? Ultimately, programs are made out of decisions. Yeah? Like, what do you do when you code? You make lots of little annoying decisions. And every one of those decisions you come to regret later if it was a bad decision. You invest decisions into your program. And as your program grows, the decisions right in the middle get really hard to change. Like if you're using Flux and you want to move to Redux, that'll be really hard because you've invested all this time in that decision of which technology to use. So the other reason why I hate REST is because sorry, you can't see that on the side. So I sometimes, Alan Kay has this view that we've got program complexity or problem complexity. And in theory, the complexity of our solutions should just be this green line. As our problems get more complicated, we should be making ever-increasingly complicated solutions, but only linearly. But when we have extra sort of pieces of our program that we have to make decisions about, it means that there's more decisions that slip in there. They like sneak in and, hate us. So it's like, so it's kind of like this, or whoop, that's maybe a bit too fast, but something like that, right? Like the solutions get complicated way faster than our problems actually get complicated. And this is really crappy. So we have this whole big space here, which, if this is our essential complexity down here, this is the part we need. This part up here is like, it's like a tax on bad abstractions. I don't have room. It's a bad abstraction tax. You have to pay it when you don't have the right tools to be able to do your job. I like thinking about things like this when we start talking about tools like React. And React is fantastic, not because it is a really nice to use tool or because Facebook made it or because it's got nice dev tools. These are all true. But it's nice because it decreases the number of decisions I have to make on a daily basis when I'm trying to figure out how my tools work. This is one of the reasons I really like Flux, not Flux the code, Flux the idea, because it's a rule. And then I don't have to make decisions on a data by data basis of which direction where my data goes. The rule is your data goes in one direction. The end. It's like software in my head for designing websites. Is this piece of software which says your data only flows one direction, so there. And now there's fewer decisions I have to make. And this kind of like cost, this awful bit decreases, even if the number of lines of code that I write stays the same, because I don't have to make lots of decisions. So that's kind of how I think about this stuff. And you might be thinking, what does this have to do with GraphQL? But bear with me, we're getting there. Let's talk about a real site. And I was trying to find some decent data examples to mess around with React, with GraphQL. And I found meetup.com. Let's talk about meetup.com. So let's think about, for this website, all of the pieces of data that it needs to render. So, we're all vaguely familiar with this site. So we've got my profile picture up here. And we've got a little like alarm that says apparently I have 13 notifications. I have no idea what that is. I don't care. It's got information about the group called React Sydney and information about the event called First React Sydney Meetup. Information about the venue on the left, a whole bunch of information about the event itself in the middle. We've got a bunch of people who are going to the event, including myself up the top, and bios and pictures of all of those people. And then we have a whole bunch of comments down here. So my question is, if you're designing a REST API for this site, what API endpoints do you provide? Bearing in mind that there are two strong constraints that you want to obey. The first one is, you don't want to have to do too many round trips. If every time when I fetch the comments, if I have to then go back and refetch all the profile pictures, it's going to make the site load a lot more slowly. It's crappy, right? The second constraint is if I have some like endpoint that's the endpoint to end all endpoints, and that endpoint gets literally every piece of data on this site, I've sort of moved away from REST now. I mean, now I've just got an endpoint for this website. And as my application changes, that endpoint, not only is it huge, and I'm going to fetch way more data than I need, but say if I make a mobile version, maybe on the mobile version we don't have this list of who's RSVP'd. So I don't want that data, so now what, I've got like a version of my API for every single version of my application on every single platform. It's this awful space. And this is the other reason why REST sucks. REST sucks because you have to make this decision on an application by application basis, on an API by API basis, on a page by page basis when you're designing these endpoints, because you have to design your endpoints around the application, around these awful constraints. You have to decide exactly how much extra loading you have to do and how much is tolerable, while also, like, yeah, trying not to overfetch and provide data. And you can see this. So meetup.com has an API, which I didn't know about until yesterday. And this is their API endpoint for a particular event, which I've gone using their delightful API console. And here is all of the data that it returns. There's some interesting things to note here. The first one is that a bunch of data that's on that site is missing from this list. So if I would actually build my own meetup.com site, I would have to do multiple fetches, multiple round trips to get all that data. And the second thing to notice is there's a bunch of information that has nothing to do with the event coming through here. We've got information about, hands up if you can read this clearly from the back. Okay, you guys have better eyesight than me, which is good, because I'm really close. So we've got information here about the group. Like the group, this is an event. It has nothing to do with groups. Oh, no, it's only some of the fields from the group. Great, okay, I've got a few of the fields from the group, and I've got some information, and I'm missing some information, I've got too much information sometimes, and this is the world that we're in with REST. And I'm bringing all this up because GraphQL is a replacement for REST. I should point out, so if you haven't seen GraphQL at all yet, GraphQL is a piece of technology for us to be able to do queries, to ask the database things, and get back information. And as part of the query, we can specify exactly what fields we want, and that specification can be nested arbitrarily. So I'm going to get into this soon, so I'll show you actual real GraphQL. But I want to point out that GraphQL specifically replaces REST. It does not replace your database, and it does not replace React. GraphQL is designed to work really well with React. But you still have a database, and you can still use SQL or Mongo if you hate yourself or whatever. That's fine. But yeah, that's the, I mean, I don't judge just for a little bit. I say all that having worked at a startup for 2 years where we used Mongo, and I wanted to replace it every day. Anyway, so that's kind of this thing that we do, right? So if we look at this site, yeah, we've got all of this stuff. So let's talk a little bit about sort of architecture. Since I don't need to write many things if I already draw all the stuff beforehand, which is sort of nice. So this is our classic infrastructure thing, and I colored things in green if there were decisions that you didn't have to make. So you don't have to design your own database, and you don't have to design SQL, but you do design your schema. So the yellow things are the things that you have to do, like the bits of work, the places where decisions go to die when you make these applications. Not to die, like to sort of it's like a stone in your shoe isn't really dead. It's anyway, so we need to decide what's in our database, we need to decide all the data and how it's going to go. And then we also have to design our components, so exactly what's in our page and how our page is going to render out. And specifically when I'm rendering a component in my React site, I'm going to have to, I need to know what data that component's going to need. So if I go back to the Meetup site, and I look at this, do we have a Mark Hazel in the room? Not here? Okay. Well, Mark Hazel has a name and a photo, a profile picture. This is a component. If this is a component that was rendering Mark Hazel, then this component's obviously going to need to know that data, right? Like it's going to need to know his name and his profile picture. So, so my component knows what data it needs. The annoying thing is that my REST API also needs to know what data my component needs because I need to figure that out. And I need to create and provide REST API endpoints in the classic way, understanding my schema and understanding my application and understanding which pages I'm going to need and doing all that without having to over fetch data, so I'm not giving you too much information. And I'm also not going to make you do too many round trips, but like a couple are okay, I guess. So GraphQL, the magical source that I haven't shown you yet, the point of that is to do this and say, right, we've already got React here, and we're going to use this thing called Relay. I'm not going to show you Relay. Relay is another piece which fits really nicely together with React that Facebook's made. Relay will scan all of my components and say, oh, you're trying to render this page with lots and lots of stuff in it. I know that all of those components, because the components are going to declare it, I know what data those components are going to need exactly. And Relay also grabs the schema from your website. So Relay says, oh, hey, I saw that cool schema you have. It looks like you've got profiles, you've got some other stuff. So I'm going to mush that schema with the actual queries that you're going to need, like with the data you need from your components. And it ends up making this GraphQL thing. So Relay actually will make the queries for you. So from your website, you just make a query. It's fine, right? Like you just say, hey, I need the data for this site. Here's all the components I want to render. Can you please render those components? And GraphQL does all the work of actually getting all that data from your database. I've added another piece here though, which is the GraphQL schema. The GraphQL schema is something that we're going to have to make to tell GraphQL actually how to get the data, what data is available, and how to get the data from the database. So that's the plan. Are there any questions so far? Yeah, up the back. Sorry, I'm a backend engineer, classically, so the front end for me is the part of my backend code that talks to the browser. So, but good question. Sorry, the question was, aren't client and front end the same thing? Oh, I should also mention I'm recording, so if you, this is the signal. If you want me to pause recording while you ask a question for any reason, then you can do this. Can everyone just do this momentarily so you don't feel silly? Yeah, cool. This is my, I'm snowing and I'm on a ski lift and I've got friends below and you do the signal to your friends to try and make them. It's great. Alright, so let's actually look at some code. How am I going for time? Time person? We're good?
15,
cool.
16 minutes?
Perfect, great. Alright, so I'm going to try and make a GraphQL thing for this website. And I'm not going to type everything line by line and sweat because I've done it before. So what do I have here? Alright, so I'm just going to start with this. This is some code. It's not very much code, but it kind of has like 30 lines of nothing code. This is the simplest thing that you need to be able to keep GraphQL working, basically. I'm going to point at some lines and talk, but it's not interesting in any way. So this is just a Node.js application. I've npm installed everything already, so we don't have to do that. I'm going to use Express because it's Node and I'm using HTTP. I'm using a thing called Express-GraphQL, and Express GraphQL just lets me say this, like app.use /GraphQL is going to be GraphQL. And then the GraphQL thing is this schema. I've got a schema, which I'm going to show you in a second. And then GraphIQL : true. GraphIQL is a debugging tool, which I'm going to show you in a second, which has a very great pun. It's like graphical, right? GraphQL, GraphEQL. Anyway, it's graph interactive. Anyway. So I'm just going to say GraphIQL : true, and that'll let me use the debugging tools. So that does that, and if I open up my web browser, I can already, let me actually run this. Node.js, because I'm lazy. This is spoilers. So if I go to localhost : 4321 /GraphQL, then I have something that's completely invisible to everybody. I have this. And this is GraphQL, or GraphIQL, graphical. And here I can make queries. So on the left I'm going to write queries, and I have autocomplete, which is amazing, and I'll show you that in a second. And on the right, I'm going to get the response to the queries back. So for example, if I have an empty query, I can go Command Enter. And because there's a very squiggly underline under the bottom close, it's not even bothering to send the query to the server. And it's not telling me anything, which is very interesting or useful. But I immediately have debugging tools available, so I can inspect and check out my own beautiful schema. So let me show you the schema. So the schema specifies a few things. It specifies what kind of data we have access to. So what are the types, all that kind of nonsense. And it also specifies for each piece of data how we're going to get access to that data. So this is all on you. GraphQL doesn't care about what database you use or any technology underneath this. It just says, look, you define some functions which say how to get data from your database, and everything else will get taken care of by GraphQL. I'm also writing this using a couple little like ES6 things, and I'm not going to apologize because it's freaking free. So I have a schema. This is my really dumb schema. It says var schema equals new g.graphql schema because we love OO. And we have to define inside here what queries are. So ultimately, there's a thing which is the query root. So I'm going to make a query. I'm going to say, hey, I want some data. And you provide some little hook so that you can say, get me that thing. Ooh, that thing has references to some other stuff. So for example, on the site with, I don't explain that very well, but I'll give you an example. On this site, the root thing, the root kind of object in my database that I might think about or might think to ask is, for this URL, what is the actual event that's going on here? Or I might ask, who am I? Because I'm logged into meetup.com. So I could say, hey, who am I? And it would give me information about me. And then I could say, ask it, who am I? And also, can you tell me what events I've said yes that I'm going to go to? So, so this is my query. My query is an object type. And my query's name is root query type, because that's what it had in the example. It has some fields. And so this is, you'll see this a few more times. It has some fields. And one of the fields of my schema of my root query is the hello field. So my query, I can say, hey, can you tell me hello? And hello takes in an argument, and the argument is of type GraphQL string, and it's called message. And when the resolve function calls, so remember this is the function that's actually going to do all the work and get the data from your database, it says I'm going to return internet space whatever params.messages. And that's my awesome database. Thank you very much, I'll be here all day. And we can see that. So if I go control space here, it automatically knows, hey, do you want the hello query? Yes, I do. Oh, maybe you want to specify what the message is. Yeah, that's cool. Says hi, say. And then I hit enter, and I get back this. So boom, we've got GraphQL. Woo. Data, yeah. Internet says hi. And you might be wondering, is this using WebSockets? Is this using something super fancy under the hood? At least, if you're me, you might be wondering that, because I wonder these things all the time. And if I hit Command Enter again, all I see is there's just a GET request. Too small, big. There's a single GET request that's now invisible. Too big, go back. All right, there's a single GET request, can't see. It makes a GET request, and it basically just puts the query itself into the body of the GET request. So if I go all the way down here, I can see right down the bottom where no one can actually read. Can I? What can I?
Right click, open a new tab.
This is why we can't have nice things. Oh yeah, I could like. No, I'm not going to bother.
Under name, where it says GraphQL, right click, open a new tab.
No, I don't want to do that.
You do.
Sorry. Anyway, whatever. It's got the actual query itself. And if you right click and go copy as curl and look at the URL, look at the request, it's just putting as the body of the request the query. And the query is just that thing on the left that says hello and asking for the hello response. So this is just it's just doing it over regular HTTP requests. There's no magic here. It's just an express endpoint that does that. So that's pretty cool, but that's not very interesting for a bunch of reasons. So let's actually start getting some data in here. So as I say, I've cheated and I have bits that I've prepared earlier. So I actually care about events because I want to have my awesome wrapper around the meetup.com API. By the way, all this code, I'm going to put it up online, so don't worry about anything. So I need to specify for my event what type of thing an event is. We've got a schema, but I also need to tell it, hey, this is what an event is. These are the fields that events have. And for now, I'm just going to do something really simple, which is I'm going to say an event is just a new GraphQL object type called event. It's got a description, so you get automatic documentation generation. And here are some fields that it has. It has a name field and a description field. So far, this is pretty boring. And then then I can do this. So I'm going to make it so that my hello query, instead of returning a string, is going to return a event, which I've specified above. And when I resolve, instead of resolving to a string, I now need to resolve to, well, an event object. But, I mean, I don't have to pass or anything. I just return a JSON object. And this is saying there's going to be a JSON object with cool event, and then the description is going to be whatever the message is. So I'm going to save that, and being the only speaker without hot reloading makes me sad, but there it is. Reload this, and now it says that field hello is sad. Did I do something wrong? Oh yeah, wait. Message, field hello, must have a sub-selection. Oh yeah, so now hello is going to return an event. So what does that mean? That means that I need to put some curlies in here to say, hey, what fields do I want back from hello? Do I want the name? Yeah, I want the name, and I want the description. And now I can run that query, and it says cool event. It says hi. So that's something, right? Yeah. But, and this is a really cool thing, if I don't want the description, because I'm on mobile and you don't have enough room for the description, I just take that out, and now I don't get the description back. The query shows me only the parameters that I asked for, and nothing else. Yeah, so that's really cool. Or just the description or whatever. So that's something that's really nice about GraphQL already. But that's not very useful because I want to actually get actual data, and that's not very good data. So let's actually grab this data from a real website, like the actual meetup.com API, like the REST API. So let's do that. So I'm going to add in a little bit of code. I've cheated because I didn't want to get banned from the meetup.com API for making lots of API requests, and I was worried the internet would be bad here. I've just made something with a little level DB thing that's just going to cache all my HTTP requests from yesterday. And now what I want to do is, instead of just returning cool event, I'm going to return this. Oops. Is that? Yes, that, we'll see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to return a request. So I'm just making a request to this API endpoint, and I'm just going to return that. Now, this request API I'm using uses promises. So actually, this function's returning a promise. And it's returning a promise for some data when the data is ready. So right now, this is just the API endpoint for that REST endpoint I just showed you. And I'm going to save that and run it. And we can see what that does. So if I go back here, and now hit enter here, I can see that the description is the first ever React Sydney Meetup, right? Hey. What's its name? Its name is First React Sydney Meetup. So that just happened. We're now using, yeah, thanks. I'm down for this, you guys applauding as often as you like. It makes me feel great. So we've got now a name and a description, and we can have whatever other fields. So remember that we're making a JSON request, so it's fetching a whole bunch of data and sending it back, and then keeping 2 fields from this whole thing. So let's just make this more useful. Here's one I prepared earlier. For event, with all this stuff. So you'll notice that there's GraphQL int, GraphQL string. There's also GraphQL list of some other type. There's GraphQL objects. There's GraphQL something that can't be null, and then you can say what thing can't be null. So I can have lots of fields and run that. Oops. And if I refresh this, it'll grab the latest version of the schema. Oh, I don't know if anyone noticed, but I can ask for the schema. So what types are there in the schema? And for each type, I would like to know its name, please. And because GraphQL can query itself, it just generates this automatically. GraphQL is actually working like this. It's making GraphQL requests as well to ask it what the metadata is and ask it what types are available. And we can also click on documentation over here and say, hey, what's the root query type? Oh, that's something that takes in a string and returns an event. And an event is something with all of these fields. If I bothered to put in descriptions, I would have descriptions of all the fields here, which is really cool. If you start using Relay, which is the React.js plugin for GraphQL, you'll also get, you can get autocomplete suggestions, and you can get exceptions being thrown saying, hey, you've misaligned your variables and stuff, which is awesome.
What was the name of that?
Relay. So if you Google for React GraphQL, it'll be Relay is the thing. Relay is the front-end framework that you can use to be able to access GraphQL easily from React, from the browser. But I don't want that. I want the other thing I had. So, hello, and I would like, hey, look at all this stuff. I would like to know the name of the event, and the RSVP limit, and the waitlist count. And that, as of last night, is what these numbers were. There was a limit of 50 people, and 119 people were on the wait list. So that's cool, and obviously I can get any other data that I have in here, right? I can just get whatever data I need. The way that you'd actually hook this up in your application, let me talk to you about that. Go away. Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, sorry. All right, so if I think about my site, I'm just going to cheat, and I can think about it as like these different color-coded sections of the different kinds of data that I have. So this like light blue greenish color is the actual event itself with the location. I've got some comments down the bottom. I've got the RSVPs. I've got information about the group, and also I didn't include it, but I've got information about my profile and who I am logged in. Obviously, I only want to make one request. So that's the theme of GraphQL, one request to do everything. So the way that I actually, like you set this up with GraphQL, is the query that you end up making is a query for all of the event details. And as part of that event, I'm going to ask for what group that event's part of and whatever fields I need to render the group stuff. I'm going to ask it for the comments, because from an event, I can access what comments there are for that event. And for each of those comments, I might request the profile picture. And also for each of the RSVPs, I might also request the profile pictures or some information about those users. And I can think about this as sort of a tree. And this tree follows the tree of my React components, which is really cool, because it means that you don't have to do all this work. For each of your components, you just say, hey, this component's going to need this data, including something from its parent. And then Relay will take care of actually figuring out what the query looks like. But I'm not going to show you Relay, so I'm just going to talk about it. But that's the kind of thing that we're aiming for with all of this. So anyway, so I've got that, and that's kind of cool. How am I going for time? Am I good? 5 minutes? Cool. All right. So I'm going to move through some more stuff quickly. So, so let's now add something for an event.group field, because I want my events to also have a group field that I can request data out of. So I'm going to add this, which is one of the extra types inside event. So after all that stuff, I'm going to have a group. And the group says, and notice that the group's different from this other stuff. I'm also going to have to add a type for group to tell it what type group is. But I've also got this resolve function. Resolve means, and I can apply this resolve function to any of these fields. Resolve says, when you actually go and try and figure out what this field is, this is how you do it. So based on the data that was passed in for my event. So if you think about it, an event is created with a blob of JSON. So it takes a blob of JSON and it like populates all of these fields based on all of this stuff. For group, I specify it as a function, a resolve function, saying, hey, given the blob of JSON for the event, I actually want you to take that event.group.url name, which is the bit that says React_Sydney or something, and then make another REST API request for that so that you can get all of the group information. We're not going to use any half-assed, like a few fields out of a bad REST API thing here. No, thank you very much. So that's what we'll do with the group. And here is a group that I've made. So you'll notice as well that groups have a next event field, which is the next event that group's going to have. And the next event is an event, right? And we can get the event back out from using the same GraphQL API to do that. So I'm going to do that, and so as well as events, I've got groups. You'll notice this is really verbose. I'm expecting in about 5 years when everyone gets sick of GraphQL because it's something new and cooler, they're going to be complaining about this, which is fine.
This is awesome.
Yeah, this is, yeah.
5 years.
How long do you think? Who thinks longer than 5 years before we get sick of GraphQL?
A couple of years.
Who thinks less?
Give it 12 months.
That's not all the hands. Who thinks exactly 5 years? That's me, everybody, right?
I think until Dan Abramov gets his hands on it.
Yeah, and then he'll make a version of 50 lines.
It will be 5 more frameworks to 5 years.
Right, so now I'm going to ask for the group, and from the group, I'm not going to ask for the group name. And now the group name is React Sydney. Cool, right?
Yeah.
And if I want, I can ask for the group's description, and maybe the group's next event. And from the next event, I would like to know the name of the next event. So it turns out that, through some coincidence, the next event from the first React.js meetup happens to actually be the first React.js meetup. But, you know, I can see that, right? Like, I can keep on going. If I wanted, I could, like, get the event and get the next meetup and keep on doing that for as long as I like. You'll notice that it's called GraphQL, but this is actually a tree, which bothers me in some small way. I don't know if anyone's noticed, yeah. So I can do that, and I can get arbitrarily nested queries out of this. So that's pretty cool. Are there any questions about this so far? Is this like black magic?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. There's nothing. Notice that I don't even have a database. This is just like, I now have a website that I can use to query anything about meetup events from like 200 lines of code. And I can interactively do that, and I can build websites on top of this API if I want to. And those websites only have to make one query to get as much data as they want, even though I'm making multiple REST queries to make this happen. But, you know, you win some and you lose some. So that's cool. I'm going to add an RSVP list as well, because I'd like to see all the people who've RSVP'd, even though it's a bit creepy. So this is stuff that you should know is all available via the API. So this is the RSVP list. And I'm doing exactly the same thing here for the RSVP list. This is not very interesting. Except that I'm going to add a couple more types for a member and RSVP value. So they're all going to exist as well. Right. And now, if I refresh this, I can ask, as well as for all of this stuff, I can ask this event for the RSVP list. And I can, now I've done one extra thing with the RSVP list, which I want to talk about. When I get the RSVPs from the event, you'll notice that RSVP list also has a resolve function. Oh, sorry, no, I haven't done anything interesting with this yet. This is fine. Sorry, spoilers. So from the RSVP list, I would like the member, and from the member, I would like their, maybe just their name and what the URL for their photo is. And now I've got the list of all the people who have RSVP'd, including some people who don't have photos. And I could also, for example, in terms of the RSVP list, ask whether or not they've responded. And now we can see who exactly are the unlucky people on the wait list, who has said no to the event, and who has said yes. So that's all accessible from here. Again, notice that I can just arbitrarily nest. So I did do one interesting thing. Well, I did a couple of interesting things. One of them was that the RSVP list, if we go back to the JSON, I'm not going to show it to you, but if we go back to the JSON, all of this data is just like mushed in together. But I actually wanted to pull members out because I might want to reuse that member type in other places. And so what I did was I said that for the member variable inside RSVP, when we resolve that, I actually grab the RSVP.member variable from the RSVP item itself. And then say that member data.photo is equal to, like, grab the RSVP underscore member data, member underscore photo field, and pack all of that stuff into this member data object, and just return the JSON object. So this is just a JSON object with a .photo field, and .member already had a .name field. So I've just made a JSON object with a name and a photo field. And then all I'm doing is returning the member data, and then I've got a type called member. And member's result function, well, actually member doesn't have anything interesting in here. It just has a member ID, a name, and a photo fields. I'm just like normalizing the photo field to be photo.high-res underscore link. So I'm pulling that out of the JSON and reformatting the JSON a little bit. So this is all fine. This is all doable. So yeah. So that's all kind of some cool stuff. I want to show one last thing, which is the final version of all of this. So I spent a little bit more time doing this, and I'm just going to run. I can't see it down there. Server.js, and I'll show you some more features of query language, because that's useful. All right, so I made a couple more changes, and I'm not going to show these to you. I just made, instead of having a hello field, I made an event query parameter type, which is unreadable. I made an event query type, which takes in a URL name, which is part of the REST API, and also the event ID. And so here I can request the name and ID of the query. And that works. So that's the ID and name of that. But now it's generic because I'm passing in the URL name and the event ID. I could actually request some other different events from different organized groups and meetups. So for example, I could ask for, so I've got that. I've also got a group, so I can just get the group directly because there's an API endpoint for it, so we may as well. You can add whatever you want to the root query. You can have as much stuff as you want in here. So I might just say, can I have the group with name, was it React Sydney? And I would like the name field of that, and it's called React Sydney. It has an ID of that, so I can get some stuff. But I could also say, ask for the group, say, random acts of kindness. So random acts of kindness also has a name and also has a next event, which we can ask about because I'm curious. What's the name of the next event? Oh, the name of the next event is Info Night. When is it? Oh, it's just then. That's pretty soon. Who's going?
Somewhere like December.
So here's all the people who are going. For each person who's going, I would also like to know the member, and I want to know what their name is. Oh, okay. Here's all the people who are going's names. And we can see a whole bunch of people, which is also kind of creepy. But yeah, this is all publicly available information right now. So I can do stuff like that. Sometimes it's really annoying if I have, so I can do that, and I might also want two groups. So I can say random acts of kindness is this stuff, and let's just get the name of the random acts of kindness group to make this simple. And also React is this with group React Sydney. And now my query comes back with the React portion being this part of the query called React, and the random acts of kindness section from the random acts of kindness section. So I can make as many queries as I want. So that's cool. I can also sometimes, maybe I don't want to have to type name, or I don't want to have to type a whole bunch of fields because I want to get a whole bunch of fields for some different properties. I can make a thing called fragments. I'm just going to, this is like a blitz through some of the features so you know what's available. I can do something like this, and this says that, that there's a fragment called stuff on an event. So for each event, I'm going to ask that for the name, the description, the RSVP list with a limit of 2, because I passed that into one of the parameters. And here I'd say, all right, for these two groups, I would like the next event, and just get me all of those parameters that I requested. And I can run that, and now it's going to get all of those parameters for both of those fields. So the RSVP list limited to 2, and what else did I ask for? The name and the description, and this other stuff. Yeah, so we can keep on going, right? So GraphQL, I mostly want to today give you enough information that you get excited about GraphQL, and that you go and look up stuff online, because I can't explain all of GraphQL in half an hour. For whom have I achieved that goal? Who's interested in looking up more about GraphQL? Okay, who doesn't or isn't interested? That's totally fine. We can talk later. But yeah, so GraphQL has a bunch of stuff. Things I haven't shown to you with GraphQL, this is like, I mean, I can show you GraphQL features, but you can look up online from this point. I haven't shown you mutations. GraphQL also supports the ability to do mutations. And it's basically like an RPC style thing where you specify, in the same way as we've specified what queries are on our server, I've said I can query for groups and I can query for events. You can also say, I would like to specify a mutation, and here's the mutation. Mutations as well take in arguments, and then they return some data. And you can get the data back from the mutations. You can say, I would like to make a mutation where I change my name, and I would like to get back the new name field for some reason. And so you can do that with mutations, and that's kind of cool. Instead of saying query, you say mutation. So they're pretty simple. And the final thing I would like to mention, but I'm not going to show you, is query variables. If you want, sometimes you have a big list of things, which happens once or twice, and you want to say, I would like to move through this list. So as the user scrolls, you want to get more items from the list. You can specify that the position in your list is a query variable, and then you can say, hey GraphQL, I would just want to change this query variable. Can you tell me what the result of that query would be if instead of starting from item 1, I started from item 100? So you can change query variables and use that to be able to do, like, iterate through lists and whatnot, which is kind of handy. But yeah, that's GraphQL. That's why I care about it, and that's why I'm excited about it. Personally, the thing obviously this is missing is real-time features. Some people are working on real-time features for GraphQL specifically, but I really want to adapt GraphQL and make something that's slightly different to this in an annoyingly incompatible way. And make it real-time or make some way that you can also subscribe to queries, because I think that's totally rad. But if I was going to do that, well, like when I do that, I'm totally going to base it on GraphQL, because I think this is absolutely fantastic. So yeah, so if we come back, we can see that this is the sort of thing that we've got for our queries. We've got all the data that our browser needs. I'm not showing you this last piece, which is exactly generating this query from my React components, and then using that query to populate all the data. But you can totally imagine how that code would work. It's just going to make that and do that, which is great, because now it means you don't have to make REST endpoints, and you don't have to do a whole bunch of work. Facebook also says that for them, they haven't, there's like, what about versions? There's no versions in GraphQL. They found they haven't had to like deprecate versions or like have any versioning stuff in GraphQL at all so far. And they've been using this for about 2 years, which I find absolutely blows my mind. And I'm just like surprised. I'm like, just you wait. But they said that what they can do is when they release a new feature, if they want to like change some small field, they just add more stuff to GraphQL. GraphQL has no cost if you're not using some fields that the database is returning or that your query is able to get. So they can deprecate fields by marking them as deprecated for the dev tools, but they just have it slowly increasing with the amount of stuff the database is capable of fetching. And then in clients, if someone's got an old version of the iOS app or something, that iOS app can still use the old version, or like still use those fields, and those fields still will work. Well, also if they want to bring out some new version on Android, which has some particular feature set, or like Messenger that has to do something, Messenger can just use different, new, or the same query fields as something else, which is cool. So that's kind of all I wanted to talk about. But I think we've got like maybe a couple more. Do we have ish? Are there any questions? Yes, up the back.
So if you have a GraphQL packet, you've only got one endpoint. If you've got one endpoint, if you've only got one endpoint that you're hitting for your information, so you've got several promises that you're resolving when you've got external requests.
Yep.
How do you deal with, say, one of those requests lagging for a period of time?
Great question. So the question is, if you've got a whole bunch of different requests going on because you've got promises, what happens if just one thing lags? First of all, I should point out that all of the promises will run in parallel. So if you've got to make some web request for some part of your thing, and then you've got to do 20 of them, they're all going to fire off at the same time and return in parallel. If just one of them lags, I have no idea how you deal with that. Unfortunately, you could probably make your promise have a timeout on it so that your promise would time out and then it would just return nothing to the browser and then tough luck or something. That's how I would approach it. But yeah, but generally that kind of thing works really well. The basic idea is that you want from the user's device to your front-end server, which I'm going to keep on calling the front-end server. From the user's device to your server, the browser makes one request and your server delivers one response. It's not like the browser makes one request and then the server says, oh, here's some data, also here's some more data later. It's just like one round trip. And it's up to you on the back end to be able to make, when the user does actually make that query, efficiently fire off SQL queries or whatever you have to do on the back end so that you don't have to spend a whole ton of time and work getting all that data back. So that's your job. Yeah.